So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar today. My name is Rohit. I'm the CEO of IOMED. IOMED is a company dedicated to generating real-world data and insights for the industry. We do that by partnering with a federated network of hospitals, where we've created data spaces, organizing and standardizing data. We provide deep data by using AI technology as well. So you have both structured and unstructured data sources. And then the other part of what we do is also provide mediation. So the use of this data, very deep data, with the industry for clinical research initiatives. So thanks again for your time this morning. This is the third webinar that we're doing from IOMED to provide insights and share our experiences with the industry on real-world data, real-world evidence, and share the insights of the projects that we've coordinated. To date, we've done over 45 projects, and we have a unique position within the industry because we engage with both, with all stakeholders really in the clinical research realm. So we work with hospitals, we work with CROs, we work with pharma. The first of our webinars was really looking at the European health data space and the experience of one of our federated network hospital partners. The second one was really focused on the view from the use cases for pharma. And today, we'll be looking through the lens of the industry, looking through the lens of a CRO, and just looking at generating real-world evidence and the role of AI within that, but looking at it from the perspective of a CRO. To support me today, I'm extremely honored and happy to welcome Dr. Montserrat Barceló. I'm going to call you Montse because I've always called you Montse. She's been involved. She's been in the industry for over 30 years. Previously, the chief operating officer at TFS, the Swedish headquarters, and more recently, the vice president of Europe at Veristat, a leading global clinical research organization headquartered in Boston. With the 30 years of experience in pharmaceutical and clinical research sectors, Montse has played pivotal roles in shaping the landscape of clinical trials across Europe. A graduate in medicine and surgery from the University of Barcelona, she began her career as general manager at Clinical Data Care, marking the company's first expansion outside of Sweden. She later joined TFS, which is where we met, a Scandinavian CRO, where she advanced from regional managing director, global chief operating officer, overseeing operations in 18 countries and leading a team of over 600 clinical research professionals. In 2021, Montse spearheaded the launch of Veristat's first European office in Barcelona. Beyond her executive role, she's deeply committed to fostering leadership and innovation. Now, if that wasn't enough, she's also a founding member of EGECON, an association dedicated to promoting gender diversity in senior management, and an advisor at We Rock Capital, a network of women investors. Her passion for continuous learning and mentorship underscores her dedication to advancing the healthcare ecosystem. If you ever follow Montse on LinkedIn or any of the social media posts that she's always in, super active, always promoting. I really don't know where you get the energy from, to be fair, Montse. So in this interview, we're going to delve into your experience, Montse, your insights in the evolving landscape of clinical research, and also just some of your vision on the future of healthcare innovation in Europe. So welcome. Thank you for joining this webinar today and supporting IOMED with this session today.
Thank you so much, Rohit, for having me in this beautiful office. In fact, I'm sitting at IOMED office today. We are both in the same hub. It's Barcelona Health Hub in a very old hospital, which right now is leading the digital health in Europe. So you are more than welcome to visit us, and you will be able to visit both IOMED and Veristat while being here. So thank you for having me, Rohit.
Okay, so I'm really excited to get this started. So you've had, obviously, just based on the introduction we've done, you've had a very illustrative career in the CRO space. Could you take us through some of the challenges that you faced and some of those that you feel CROs will continue to face in the future as well?
Well, after, during 30 years, I mean, the challenges have been tremendously different, no? Probably when we met Rohit more than 15 years ago, we had one challenges, which right now we don't have anymore, or we have other ones, no? But the one which still is within the sector, and I always like to highlight, it's the lack of diversity at the C-level and board level within the companies. I think, I was really surprised when I started in this industry where, life science, 80% of women within the industry, recruiting a lot of women super prepared with PhD, with high degrees and being the best at the university, And at the end, I was advancing in my career, managing director, regional managing, BP, C, and then going into the board. And even I have worked with the Scandinavian companies. So imagine my surprise seeing that at that level, there was no diversity, And unfortunately, this is something which still the sector is having, and it's quite a shame. And that's why, I find time during weekends, after work, wherever it's needed, to try to put actions against that lack of diversity, especially at top level, At the end of the day, we see that VC, private equity, it's more and more, measuring diversity within the companies. They know that diversity, it's equal at better profitability within the companies, better P&L, and that means that investors are looking at it. So I really hope that the sector will change, In fact, we launched, it was launched here in Europe a few years ago. It started in US, the Healthcare Businesswomen Association, HBA, and just a couple of months ago, it was launched, the chapter here in Spain, I mean, and that's what we need, of course, the sector changing, but then associations that are helping women through coaching and mentoring and delivering that career path to change that leadership. So that was a challenge, is a challenge, and I think we need to change that. The second one, probably, if I look back when we started, it was about partnership. I was really surprised when I got into this sector and pharma was so dependent on CROs to deliver, the clinical studies and all the data to the regulators, but there was no partnership at all. I mean, they were the clients, they were the pharma, we were the vendors, we were the CROs, and even though we had just one goal, I mean, we did not have that type of partnership, which is so needed for the success on the relationship with the different stakeholders that you need to deliver the data. I think also, again, organizations like PCMG, which I was, at the annual meeting at the steering committee for a couple of 3 years, I think they have done a lot of work to try to understand that this partnership is needed. And probably partnership is more needed even now. I mean, because at that time we were talking about pharma and CROs. Right now we are talking about companies like you guys, the ones that have data, the digital type of new coming members that we have. If we don't really, there is one goal here, which is that project needs to deliver the quality of the data that regulators need. So if we don't truly act as partners, I mean, we will not succeed. So more needed than ever, even though I think that challenge, it's much, much less challenge right now. I like to reinforce that always, because it's so needed,
Yeah, and I think even our experience previously, but now, we are coming in early into these discussions to address the needs of the clinical initiatives that are coming to the table. From very early to designing the projects to actually looking at how we partner together to deliver on the projects, and we've seen that at IOMED as well. Coming in early because we're trying to also explain real world data. We're trying to explain how we use AI, etc., and then looking at the unstructured data as well. So now, just before I move on, I'm going to ask one more thing because you've kind of been in between the pharma and, when I say you, CROs, but yourself, I know specifically between pharma and CROs, and then providers, vendors like ourselves. Advisors like ourselves on certain technologies, and you mentioned innovation in your summary here as well. So I've got a quick question here. Do you think is it pharma trying to keep up? When we think about innovation, is it the CROs having to keep up with the pharma, or the pharma having to keep up with the CROs? Because there's always a bit of a chicken and egg scenario here. And I know there's been times where we want to promote new technologies and new ideas, but then maybe the pharma's not ready, or the pharma's doing it and CROs not ready. Just your thoughts on that before I move on.
I mean, there is not one or the other. And I think that relates a lot and resonates a lot with the partnership I was talking about. We have one goal here now. I mean, there is plenty of more data out there. There is a lot of solutions that can help us to bring better data, to maybe do trials differently, and a change is needed. So it's not about CROs leading the change or pharma leading the change. I think it has to be together, and not only CROs. Again, I mean, companies like you guys being involved. No, I remember the days also when we had the remote monitoring, that we started to change completely the landscape. How useful it was to create that team that was called Transcelerate. Yeah, there had been some discussions about it. It was as useful as money was invested, but at the end of the day, it was the first time ever that in a place there was like the vendors, the providers, the sponsors, even some important sites deciding how we were going to do to change completely how we did monitoring in the past, which was tremendously traditional, where other sectors, completely different than other industries, were evolving so fast with new technology and technology platforms coming in. So I think it's a matter of putting all together, and probably regulators have also something to do there, but putting them all together. And why not to use that Transcelerate model and try to recap with that, because many changes that we will discuss today are going to happen, and we need those type of platforms to work together in one single goal.
Excellent. So, and again, with 30 years of experience, we could spend lots of time focusing on those things. But I'm going to move forward towards really the key topic for today. Unlocking the power of real-world data to transform clinical trials. Now, what we've looked is kind of when we were planning this, we were just looking at a clinical trial, looking at different elements around a clinical trial. So let's just walk through this. From a design and feasibility perspective, Montserrat, how is real-world data being used to inform protocol design or feasibility assessments today? Are sponsors demanding more evidence upfront? Your thoughts?
I think it's more and more, and one of the reasons is also because still amendments is one of the big problems that we are facing. So of course, I mean, we should use more real-world data when it comes to at the early stages and validate that protocol. And it's true, sponsors more and more are asking us to show evidence on how did we calculate the sample size, how it's the treatment patterns of that patient. Remember, in the past, we didn't think about that. It was more about, you have the sample size, more or less check the inclusion-exclusion criteria. What about the treatment patterns, who are sometimes extremely different, not only within one country, even within one region of that country. So all that data, I mean, if you don't trust the real-world data, I mean, you will probably not have the right protocol to be set up. And at the end of the day, amendments are super costly. I mean, it creates a lot of side dissatisfaction and demotivation. You need to be trained again. You need to change again that procedure. I mean, the quality of the data is not as good because you are comparing data, previous amendment, after the amendment. And at the end of the day, I mean, let's talk about cost and of course time here. We are putting a burden on a higher cost on the clinical study, and of course the study probably will take longer because of those amendments and the approvals that have to go through. So yes, definitely. I mean, sponsors are asking more and more to have evidence on that protocol that you have designed and you have thought about that.
Yeah. And we're seeing this very much here as well. In fact, it's probably one of the most common kind of starting points in discussions that we're having with industry overall. There's typically, can you do me a patient count? Can you tell me if there's a certain population of data that we could, or a certain cohort that we can focus on to start making decisions as well? So Gabby is who's also joined he's our co-founder, president, and CTO. We're going to go into the platform a little bit later to show how we demonstrate these use cases to the industry. But definitely one of the things that we see most often is talking about that design and that feasibility up front. So a lot more engagement. And again, back to your earlier point, partnership around there as well. So let's move into patient recruitment. We've seen that patient recruitment still remains one of the biggest trial bottlenecks. Again, another big discussion point that we're having with the industry all the time. Just your thoughts. How are CROs using real-world data to identify and reach eligible populations more effectively?
Probably, I think this is the first thinking when a company is thinking about using real-world data. Patient recruitment is the first thing that comes. It's still the biggest problem, as you mentioned. No, still it's the burden on that we are facing on having projects which are more expensive than finally we stipulate it on the budget, and again that timing issue. No, so yeah, definitely, I think that's probably the first thing that when you are thinking, how can I use real-world data in my clinical studies, it's in patient recruitment that comes, even though we will see that it's in many other aspects, no? But patient recruitment is the most popular now. You know, it helps to identify eligible patients. You have medical history in real time. It's not about what you saw, what you thought, what you had experienced previous month. I mean, it's real time. Another thing which, of course, I mean, we are having pressure on having diversity in clinical trials, and that's sometimes a challenge. Come on, I mean, you have real world data there. You have real data. If you need diversity, take it and use it. No, so I think that's also one of the things. And yeah, I think it's really the tool where probably the door is opening more on using real world data in clinical studies. The first thing that people think I have the problem, Rohit and Gabriel, and you know that it's normally coming when the problems come. Sometimes you lack that planning. No, it's like, wow, we have real problem now. We expected those number of patients. We were promised, even though we checked the medical history, blah, 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 and we did all the checks, patients are not there. And then you come, do we have a solution there? Can we use real world data? Can we use that, company to help us? And I think that comes a little bit late. Again, I think this should be faced at the beginning, and the sponsors and CROs should look it as a solution, I think, as a must nowadays.
Yeah. And again, something that we are very well versed with here because of the discussions that we have with the industry. Specifically when you're talking about rare disease and kind of complex recruitment studies needs as well, where you're trying to find not just kind of, targeted populations for second level treatment as opposed to, just kind of general first level treatment. And so those are discussions that were coming in earlier with kind of looking at the data and providing the right insights. The other thing we're seeing here is more of a multi-strategy coming together, in the sense that we're not aiming to be a patient recruitment company here. What we're looking to do is support patient recruitment companies with the right data points to say, hey, here's how we can do this faster in a more accurate way as well. So I know there's more of a mixed and blended approach to recruitment coming through these partnerships, as well as the traditional methods that we used. So going through the flow here, site selection. I know something that we've had a number of discussions in the past. How do you feel real world data has changed approach to site selection and investigative targeting? Are you seeing an increased demand for data-driven site strategies from sponsors and CROs, your colleagues in the industry too?
And again, and sorry to focus so much on the cost, but really this is the burden. I mean, we are seeing in our industry that we are not able within technology, to keep that cost stop going up and up. And I think that's one of the reasons, because we are using real world data and we are using solutions probably too late. We need to change a little bit the methodology, how we do clinical research, and incorporate that real world data since the beginning. No? And site selection is another example. Still nowadays, unfortunately, Rohit, we are seeing sites that are promising, or they are telling you that for sure, look at the medical track records, whatever, and they promise 10, 20 patients, and you need to close them with 1 or 2 patients, no? Which is a shame. I'm sure that the double check and the track records that real world data can give to us, would have avoided that situation, no? With an additional burden to the other sites that need to over-recruit of what they were asked to recruit. So it's like a chain of things which, are not fixed nowadays, and I think it should be definitely a must to use that real world data. It's too costly to have those sites open for 1 or 2 patients. Of course, unless it's a rare disease or whatever, no? But in a general type of a study, I think it's still happening, and still, sponsors are relying on, do you have contracts already signed with that site? Yeah, but what does that mean? probably not the biggest burden that we are having nowadays. No, it's having the real medical history now today. What's going on with those patients and being eligible for the study today. No, and that's what's more important. No, than really having that traditional documentation in place that we had in the past. No, that nowadays, of course, also is electronic. It's much more faster than used to be in the past. No, with signatures and so on.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add a few thoughts here as well, Montserrat, on what you said, which is obviously very, very relevant. Data has to be organized at these different sites, and I think one of the challenges that I think the industry is facing for any types of technology or data standards is just making sure that every single site can understand the data in a standardized way. And that's something that we've obviously supported hospitals to do. And I think there's a bigger increase from hospitals. We'll talk about this a little bit later under the European Health Data Space initiative for them to organize data in the first place. But the other thing that we see we've got involved here as well is the relationships with the sites too. Obviously, when we're doing the mediations, we're engaging with PI, we're engaging with ethics committee approval for ethics committee approvals, speaking to care. In some cases, we're trying to find the PIs to support the projects here as well. So that's something that IOMED has started to get more involved with, it just because of the relationship with this. We work as data processors on behalf. We act as data processors on behalf of the hospitals. So there's another element that we can bring into this, and it goes back into partnership and expediting these things. Committees can take quite a while to approve things. So any support that you can get to that real world data, but also have the approval, is something that's going to help with moving the trial quicker.
Definitely.
So looking at regulatory acceptance of this, real world data, how receptive just looking at it from the regulatory standpoint, how receptive are regulators and sponsors to real world data being integrated into the trial process? Are there still kind of hurdles that you feel are, being encountered?
I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. I mean, I think that regulatory, it's concerned about the quality of the data. I mean, there is no standardization of the data. So I think that more and more dialogue with the regulators are needed, especially dialogue with you guys. I mean, you guys are the experts. They need to hear from you. They need to hear from the challenge that you are having, because probably we will talk about later, the technology. I mean, the different databases that you need to deal with and where the data is at the hospital side. But I think that's, and I'm not an expert here, but probably that's one of the biggest challenges. And I think that, a lot of dialogue and working together with them, it's needed. I don't know what you think about that, Rohit.
Yeah, no, so just to kind of support your viewpoint here, there's a couple of things that come to the table all the time when we're speaking with industry and with hospitals from obviously we're touching data that's extremely confidential, right, and very sensitive in that sense. So, first of all, we've got a model here that respects GDPR. We don't hold the data in any way. It's a federated network. The data is always sitting in the hospitals. I come back to the point around having a standardized format. We use OMOP, which is really a global standard for observational research. But what it does is it allows you to have a patient's when it comes to AI, which is has a lot of question marks in industries, right? What are we doing with the AI? How are we using that AI, etc. So data quality is something that we take extremely seriously. You'll see that a little bit later with the demo too. But we have a human in the loop process here as well. So we have verification on every single, especially the unstructured data sources that we are dealing with, clinical notes and things like that, to make sure and then verify that the content and the context of that information in an unstructured format can be a reliable source for structured data to be then interrogated and then used for decision making as well. But one thing that's helping us from a regulatory standpoint is just the endorsement from the industry as well. So we're seeing the FDA is really asking for real world data to be used for submissions now. You'll be familiar with that. There's been a lot of movement in the EMA itself for this, and then with initiatives like Darwin, where real world studies were used in these federated networks and have a and proven that this can make policy changes on how clinical care practice changes in the industry as well. So we are seeing it's coming up together. Still a lot of work to do, but a lot of questions to have around that. So, but appreciate your thoughts on that. I'm going to go more into the technology and infrastructure side of things. What are the main challenges? Go ahead, Montse, sorry.
Yeah, talking a little bit about regulatory. I would like also to hear about the European health data space. I mean, the regulation that it's got there. For me, when I read it, when I hear it, it looks like a major step forward, finally, to Europe to try to standardize, the access to clinical data. Yesterday, I was with a Luxembourg delegation that were visiting also Barcelona. There were the Ministry of Health of Luxembourg was there. They were talking about data lakes, and they have the data lakes also in Switzerland, and they are using the data lakes that they have in Luxembourg. So I think this is probably, a way to finally have that secure standards that, they were asking for the clinical data, no? So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, might be happy to take on this one. So I think it's extremely interesting. It's been a whole long journey. And in fact, I think the first conversations we started having with the regulators about a concept or an idea of what the HDS could be was maybe back in very early, like maybe 2010s, kind of. There were a couple of first initiatives very early on, which then started growing into big European Commission projects. And we were lucky enough to be part of those initiatives where the idea was, let's prove that this is not a technological problem, rather one of a coordination and having a same goal, a same aim to go for the same direction with the technology, and to make sure that everyone is trying to solve the problem in the same way and sharing the resources, so that we don't reinvent the wheel like many times as we have seen in the past with other technologies. No, I think EHRs, for those of us who have been in the hospitals, we have seen this. There is like so many different EHRs with so many different protocols, with so many different standards, that diversity, which was like great because it helped in the beginning to digitalize all the processes in the hospital, it has led into a very difficult problem to solve. That is, how are we going to leverage all this data all across Europe if every data point does not follow at least the same aim and the same processes to be consumed? And that's where the HDS was positioned first as a pilot, for example, through the Eden. Eden was a big project coming from the European Commission where they wanted to get at least 100 hospitals all over Europe where they were aiming to have data in the same format, where all the data was standardized so that use case that had been generated in the southern part of Europe, it could be executed in any part of the other rest of the hospitals of the network, because at the end the data was the same. I really like, there is this image where the idea was like, let's make every hospital like a standard plug, so that we can later on make sure that whenever we generate an appliance, we can just like plug that appliance in any hospital all around Europe. And I think that starts to be a reality. We have been very lucky to be part of that journey, and in fact that's what our solution is focused on, in how to build those plugs, those data spaces that we call, so that later on all these different use cases can be plugged in as many hospitals as possible in Europe, and those can be executed without having to be thinking on the underlying technologies or having different processes in each of the hospitals, but rather like having like a single window, a single stop where I can like ask for a use case, and then it can be executed in many places at the same time. So this is very new still, even if the first EHDS project that started materializing as the Eden was in 2018. The aim is to get it live, up and running as something that is the usual way of working for 2028. But we are on that way, and now what we are doing is proving that this can scale. We first proved through these projects that this was feasible. Now we are proving that this can be really scaled, and it's really an exciting journey. And the good thing is that we have the European Medicines Agency, who has really liked the first results that have came out from this Eden network. And in fact, they like it so much that they started generating their own way of working that is called the Darwin EU. Darwin EU is a smaller network in top of the Eden, where what they have found out is partners that they can leverage for the EMA's, the European Medicines Agency's own research to make all the regulatory decision making that they need to make with real world data. And they are starting to push in that direction. And it's really good because they are also standardizing all the tooling for the analysis, they are standardizing all the methodology, and they are asking for the industry to follow the same kind of methodology. So that way we can start seeing that both the regulatory part and the regulatory branches and also the industry are converging into the same methodology to find the data that it's necessary to make a better decision making at the end, that better policy making and being able to have a better impact on the patients. That at the end is the most important thing. You're muted, Montse.
No, I said thank you. That was very useful. And I love the name, Europe Health Data Space. I love it. So yeah, well done.
Rohit, you're muted now.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. We were muted.
I think there was some problem with some noise.
Back now? Okay, sorry. Yeah. So just conscious of time here, and we've seen some requests for people to move into the platform and see the demo as well. So I'm just going to ask one kind of question, but I think we can maybe cover it in the demo as well, because I know it's one of the use cases that we can talk about. But innovative therapies like CAR-T often, really require high investment and target specific patient populations, but have the potential to save many lives. Montse, have you come across, how can real world data really help accelerate access to such breakthrough treatments?
I think a lot, Rohit. And I love that question, especially because, as you probably know, I mean, Barcelona is now, and some of the sites that we have here are leading many of those therapies and CAR-T, and we are reading a lot about it, no? So I think that, that type of real world data can help us to identify eligible patients much more faster, providing early signals on safety, which it's a big concern. I mean, you cannot wait. You cannot have the traditional, way that we were working at. I mean, you need to be faster on those safety and of course efficacy also, because I mean, we are talking about some disease which people will just die tomorrow. So I think it will of course help a lot, and again probably be used as a tool for payer negotiations, which is super important also for the industry. I mean, you will have more data evidence, and I think that will speed this type of treatments, which we have so many hopes that will change a little bit the landscape of some of the disease that we have seen, of course, improving from the traditional biological treatments, but definitely, I mean, all these gene therapies, I mean, will change a lot how we deal with that patient. So I'm looking forward to see that real world data helping it. Yeah. And I think we will see, probably, I mean, Gabriel can elaborate a little bit more because you guys have some experience on that.
Yeah, we're going to share a use case specifically on that. But I mean, you've identified key points there, finding patients faster, really tracking them early signals and effectiveness. And then, really the support for regulatory decision-making and payer negotiations as well. And it's all wrapped around that as well. We did have a slide on the European Health Data slide, but I think we can skip that because we've kind of covered that with the background that Gabby gave earlier. So let's move on here. Thank you so much, Montse. But please, obviously, we want your comments as we go through the rest of the webinar as well, and for any questions that might come as well. Gabby, I'm going to hand it over to you. We're getting requests can we look at this platform? Can we see how the mediation is done? How does the real world data look? How do we get the data from the network into the hands of the CROs or pharma who are having these clinical initiatives? So let me hand it over to you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to ask start also answering one of the questions that we had about who will be using the AI. So I think that it's very important to understand that the European health data space idea is that it's empowering hospitals. And that's an idea that I really love, because I think that hospitals are a key partner that we have to empower much more in all these processes. And all the idea behind building a data space is that the data space is installed and it's prepared in each of the sites, in each of the hospitals, and the AI tools are applied at each of the hospitals for enriching themselves. So that the idea behind of having a data space that it's enriched by AI tools is that we are later on going to be able to access more data coming from these hospitals. But it's true that at the end, what it's doing is enriching their own data space in each of the hospitals. So it's a way of maintaining the governability, to making sure that the data is accessible, but at the same time, making sure that it's the data space, the one that it's enriched, and not that the data that is coming out of the data spaces or the use cases is the one that it's enriched. That way, it's a win-win situation, because whoever is going to be using the data is going to be able to later on to benefit from the data itself and from all these AI tools that have been applied to be able to capture the data. So that's it. What I'm going to show right now, very briefly, is our solution. So right now in my computer, what I'm sharing is the IOMED data space platform. This is a window. So based on this standard of the HDS, the idea is that each of the hospitals has a data space. This data space is owned and managed and operated by each of the hospitals. And by using the platform, what we are able to do is to coordinate with these different data spaces so that we can bring the use cases that we were commenting before with Montserrat and Rohit back to life. So I wanted to share very briefly how the process looks like, so that we all have an understanding of how one can use the European health data space to execute the studies. So we have here in the platform mainly two applications. And the first one, it lets us understand and have an overview of the catalogs and the different hospitals that are part of the network, like the different dimensions and domains of the data that are going to help us understand the data in the hospitals themselves. But the idea is that we execute data orders. The idea is that when we want to execute any of these use cases, whatever it might be, that if we want to count some patients, find some patients for clinical recruitment, if we want to perform an observational retrospective study, at the end what we are doing is we are trying to execute through this network of hospitals that are in the European health data space, execute our data order or our use case through this network. So the idea is that we can just join the platform, and as soon as we join the platform, we can start generating our own study. So in this case, I want to generate a patient count. At the end, I want to understand how many patients there will be that are meeting my selection criteria. In this case, let's imagine that, as Montse has mentioned, what we are trying to do in this case is rather than arriving late and understanding if we have the patients just when we already have started the project, just do it the other way around. Let's just ask the network if we have present the kind of patients that we are looking for, and we can execute a patient count beforehand to be able to do that. So in this case, I want to focus on a rare disease, because I think this is the place where it really shines, where we can see that the EHDS has a huge impact. And let's say that we want to study amyloidosis in this case. So amyloidosis, it's considered a rare disease, and what we could do is generate a patient count, and with this patient count, start executing a find and understand how many patients we will have on the network that fulfill this criteria. So we could generate a new data order. For the sake of doing it a little bit faster, I have already prepared one project with already all the process to be able to execute one patient count, to be able to understand how many patients there will be already that they have this amyloidosis. Maybe we are not interested just on those patients that have this amyloidosis disease. Maybe we are looking for some of those pathways into the disease that are the ones that are interesting, because maybe finding just those that have the diagnosis is something that it can be done a little bit faster, but maybe we're interested on those that already also comply with having, for example, any background history about cardiomyopathy or cardiovascular disease that might be compliant with the phenotype that we are expecting for our recruitment in the clinical trial, or maybe a neuropathy. So once we have created the project, the first thing that we will do to be able to execute the project will be starting to select which of the centers we are going to be working with. Now, for the sake of the demo, we have all these hospitals that are masked, but the idea is that what we are going to be generating is first a definition of what is the data that we are interested on. So, for example, in this case, we have defined that what we are interested is on the amyloidosis itself. So we want to be able to find all the data related to amyloidosis. So for that, what we have, it's a way of defining the data that we want to in our data order as a set of concepts. At the end here, what we have is standardize all the data from all these other hospitals all around the EHDS with the same format. And this way we can then later on look for all this data. We could be also interested on the cardiomyopathy, on the arrhythmia, and we can generate all this data in such a way so that we can define the data that we want to. So once we have defined the data that we are interested on, then we can define the cohort. At the end, the selection criteria, because we want to understand which are the patients that fulfill those selection criteria. And for that, we can go just to the cohort tab. And here in the cohort tab, what we can define is a cohort entry event, so which is going to be like our main inclusion criteria, the one that makes sure that we are going to be looking for all the patients. And then maybe some secondary inclusion criteria that are going to help us to further deep down in those phenotypes that we are interested on. So, for example, in this case, for this amyloidosis case, we could be interested on those that have, for example, some peripheral neuropathy, that it's something that is very commonly related into amyloidosis and that it's starting to be seen as a predictor to be able to make the diagnosis. But also, for example, something much more specific, such as carpal tunnel syndrome, which is extremely interesting to see because this is the kind of data point that is not usually available on the hospitals or in other places rather than the clinical reports. This is not something that is usually structured as part of the data that you can find on the usual diagnosis of the patients, but rather something that any patient that might have gone through a procedure for a surgery for the carpal tunnel syndrome or that they got the diagnosis, this is something that we're going to be finding on the clinical notes, but that we are not going to be finding on the structure information. So very easily in the platform, what we can do is define this cohort. So we have just defined the data previously. So we are saying that every patient we want to have at least a condition occurrence of amyloidosis, but we could change if we would be interested on having other entry criteria. We can just change it from the list of concept sets that we have defined previously, so which are the data points that we're interested on, and we can add some other inclusion criteria. So in this case, I have added just other two inclusion criteria, those patients that have gone through the neuropathic phenotype of amyloidosis and those that have gone through the cardiovascular phenotype. And then I can do many combinations. So, for example, I could be interested on those that have a heart failure, a hypertensive heart disease, an arrhythmia, but I could choose any of the different data points that we have defined. So once we have defined the cohort, that's when the magic of the platform and participating together with the hospital starts. Because once we really want to execute this, then what we are going to do is click here in the generation button that we see on the upper right side of the screen, and then a request is going to be arriving to the hospitals to be able to participate or not in one of the in this use case. For this case, that it's a patient count, then very, very fast, as soon as we have the approvals of the hospitals to be able to execute this kind of use case, they will be able to review it. They will be able to accept it as a hospital, but they could also comment or ask for questions, sometimes ask for more information. And for those cases that might be much more complete, we will also include all the contractuals or all the protocols that also through the platform. So once we have the approval and that the hospitals are okay, then we can just jump into the deliverable phase. And in this case, we can very, very fast start seeing how many patients fulfill with this criteria. So in this case, we are seeing live data from 5 hospitals. In this case, all of them coming from the Spanish network, where 5,000 patients have fulfilled with the entry criteria. In this case, the diagnosis of the amyloidosis. But if we click in each of the hospitals, we could very easily see also for the rest of the inclusion rules that we were defining, how many of them are complying with those rules. That lets us into very, very fast being able to not only define the data that we are interested on, not only being able to put all the documentation, also asking the hospitals to be participating and to get the results in a live manner, so that it really reduces the time to data and the time to decision, that at the end I think is so important in these cases. So here what we are seeing is from those 1,000 patients in one of the hospitals that 737 persons, they just comply with having the amyloidosis, but then we have 212 that complied with having at least one of the other criteria, as we are seeing it on the phenotypes and inclusion rules that we are seeing. So this is a very fast overview and introduction, but hopefully you understood how we can go very, very fast from the definition of the data that we are interested on into getting all the documentations, sending the approvals to the hospitals, defining the cohort, and then getting a deliverable. So this deliverable then can be used for many different use cases, and depending on the use case, the approval processes are going to be a little bit longer because maybe an approval coming from the ethics committee is necessary. In this case, I just show you a patient count. So as soon as we have the from the hospitals, we can start to execute them much faster, as long as those hospitals are okay with being able to execute these kind of queries. So if I go back to the presentation, I just wanted to share very fast that what I was sharing right now was this patient count. So this capacity of being able to to find the number of patients that one or many of the sites that are part of this European Health Data Space Network are going to be able to provide. But this use case of being able to count the patients can be used not only for maybe doing a better bidding for whenever we are looking for a submission for a bid in the pharma companies, but also to a much better protocol, because we can understand the reality of the clinical practice based on the data itself, so we can understand much better the patient recruitment. But our solution can even go a little bit farther away and help us in the next steps. So maybe what we started as a patient count in the beginning to define much better our protocol, we can use later on to define a patient finder. So this means that we can recruit these patients, because each of the hospitals that are participating in the study, they can, physicians from each of the hospitals re-identify those patients that we as data users have not been able to see which are those patients, but each of the hospitals can re-identify and make that recruitment process much faster. Maybe we'll be also interested in other use cases of the data, and the platform is ready not only to provide the counts that I show you to, but also being able to execute aggregated complex analysis on the data. So for example, if we want to perform any kind of retrospective analysis or understand how a disease is in the real environment, so that we can have some data for a regulatory submission, then we can get the capability of analyzing and making this complex analysis on the platform itself, or being able to access to and export patient level data of very particular cohorts, as long as the hospitals have gone through their ethics committee and there is an approval coming from them to be able to execute these different use cases. So now that I have shared a little overview on how the platform works and how we can use this network to be able to ask these kind of questions, I wanted to share a couple of different use cases that we have or that we are actively executing. So in this case, I wanted to come back to the hook of the CAR-T that we were talking about before. So in this case, we are executing one very interesting project in a network of, in this case, 3 hospitals, where what we are doing is helping the hospitals to be able to identify the patients that are candidates for a CAR-T treatment much, much faster than what they would do if they would have expected only those patients that are coming or that the physicians are visiting by themselves. So in this case, what we are doing is for patients with different kinds of lymphomas that have gone through 3 different pathways of selection criteria. What we are doing is finding those patients and sending to each of the physicians in each of the sites the list of patients every week so that they can re-identify them and get into the diagnosis in a much, much faster manner. So this is something that is helping in this case into finding those patients that can get into a new treatment, but this is also helping some other, the same process is helping other hospitals, for example, to be able to find other rare diseases, such, for example, the Alport syndrome. So in this case, in this study, what we have done is we have worked with the Hospital Fundación Puigverd and helping them with all their chronic kidney disease patients to be able to find all those patients that have an hereditary kidney disease potentially, but that it hasn't been diagnosed so far, so that they can much faster start providing the diagnosis to these patients. So what we are talking about is that we are not only able, thanks to these processes, to make those processes much faster, but also help the same hospitals to be able to have a much faster operational process in their own sites, so that they can also participate in the clinical trials, or that they can make their clinical operations inside the hospital much more efficient and much more faster. So being able to find 53 new patients in this case of Alport syndrome that they didn't have this pathology confirmed, and seeing that more than 50% of them have already been proven that they had a diagnosis thanks to the genetic disease, is something that has helped the home hospital to go much faster, but also to start establishing new operating processes inside the hospital to be able to make these processes easier and faster. So at the end, thanks to this, the European health data space and deploying these data spaces in the hospitals, what we are doing is making the process of requesting for the data, getting the approval, and being able to deliver much faster, and having a data readiness, because we have already mapped all the patients to this format, that it's already a standard, that it's an interoperable standard, that it's the IOMED standard. And we have already also a compliance readiness, thanks to all this pseudo-anonymized and anonymized data that can help us to make all these processes much faster, and that we don't need to have access to this data to be able to the raw data, to be able to provide value already on the data, which I think is one of the most magical things of the European health data space. And finally, through the platform what we just shown, what we are able is to make this process of doing the requests, getting the approvals, getting the discussions with the hospitals, and getting the delivery of the data that we need for our use case much faster and much easier. So I think that with that, I have already provided an overview of the platform on how we can really use it to find those rare diseases patients. That is what we were focusing on today, how we can really leverage this network of hospitals to get into a much broader audience of patients. So I think that with those benefits clear, we could just jump into some of the questions that the people are making right now, and we can just try to have a quick chat on those topics.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gabby. Really comprehensive overview, and for everybody on the call, we're happy to provide deeper insights, should you require. There's a number of questions. I think some we've already tried to address on this. but I'm seeing one around. I can take this one, Gabby, but you can provide your thoughts here as well. How does your real world data represent the global population, specifically for Spain? In other words, how good is the external validity of the data? Is that something you want to comment on? I know we work mainly with big reference hospitals, university hospitals. Overall, I think we represent almost 23% of the Spanish population for our data. Any other thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, so well, I think you already shared most of the big numbers, but it's true that at the end, the good thing about this European health data space is that there are initiatives all over Europe to join in the network. This is not something that it's exclusive, but rather something where everybody can start joining. So right now, for example, at the European health data space, we have many sites all from Spain coming that are already up and running. I think that if you take the Spanish geography, there is a total of 30 different hospitals that are already available with these data spaces to be able to execute. From those, about 15 of them in Spain, they are already available at the IOMED platform so that the process can be faster and a little bit easier. But the good thing about working and talking about a standard is that we are not limited into the hospitals that we already have a relationship with, but we can also go to all these other hospitals that have already get into the platform, like into the data space, that they have already their data space up and running, and then they can join the network and make the operations much faster through the platform that we just showed with you. So about the external validity, so here mainly what we have done is making sure that we have a good geographical representation. So, for example, at IOMED, what we have is a good representation of the north, central, and east side of Spain. That representative has already been checked and paired with some stratifications analysis based on what we already have data coming from the ministry to make sure that we have the representativeness. Just to give some figures, we are talking here about 3 million different persons that have already been able to get into this standard. So we are talking about a huge amount of people, because most of the hospitals that right now are adopting this technology are big hospitals. So we are usually talking about big university hospitals such as Hospital San Pau, Hospital del Mar, Hospital 12 de Octubre, Clínica Universitaria, which are big hospitals all around Spain, which have a big presence usually on the research side of the industry, but also providing a lot of care to a huge population. So that lets us to be able to have right now a big part of the Spanish population's representativeness.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Gabby. And one of the things I just wanted to add to that, which actually addresses one of the other questions that I'll come through as well, is we've been working through establishing partnerships. So the nice thing about the platform is you've got the data, and in some cases we've organized the data, but we've also now got the partnerships for accessing that data from EU5 countries as well. So if there's a project that requires data beyond the borders of Spain, then there's other partnerships that we can provide in the data. The nice thing is the mediation still allows for the QA processes and the operative efficiency for projects to be used. So even if the data is not being organized by ourselves, it still allows for a thorough QA process and an operational efficiency to be providing that through the platform to the mediation. So one of the questions was, what does it require from the hospitals to join the IOMED network? Really, there's not much. We just need to have an engagement, talk to the hospitals, understand a little about the infrastructure, and then look at how much incentive they have to be participating in mediations and clinical research initiatives. So happy to do a follow-up on those, but really, there's a quick checklist of things that we go through to ensure that we're going to provide the relationship that you require, and it's a good fit for the federated network here as well.
Yeah, I think at the end what we're looking for is for data readiness coming from the hospital, so making sure that they have their operating like systems already digitalized. That looks crazy, but there is still some hospitals that they just got their data digitalized. So it's like we need that data readiness, we need that operational readiness. So making sure that there is a team in the hospital that can like provide the support to execute the studies and to be on top of them. But once they have already a data space that they can have built it by themselves, or we can build it for them, that's something that it leads into a very fast adoption of new hospitals into the network. And here the good thing is that an initiative like this initiative that I was talking about from the European Commission, their aim was to get 100 hospitals in this standard, and they end up having more than 150 of them. So any of these sites is a site that can very, very fast join the process of being able to execute any of the studies on top of the platform that we already showcased to you.
Thanks, Gabby. So thank you again, Montse, for supporting this discussion today. Really enjoyed the interaction. Thank you, Gabby, for showing the platform. We've run out of time. Can we just go to the slide for the QA scan? So for all the registrants here, or the people participating in this webinar today, give us your opinion. We're keen to share more insights. We're keen to have more topics being discussed in these webinar sessions. So take a picture of this, give us your feedback, and then we'll do our very best to cover those topics on the next webinar as well. Wishing you all a wonderful day. Thanks again for all the people that supported this today.
And if there is any Italian in the room, congratulations to make it to the final.
Yes.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.